not the only state that took that money and immediately put it towards prisons and jails. And I think that is just a really sad statement on our priorities as a state and as a country.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
We're going to jump right into our interview with Robyn Hyden from Alabama Arise. The legislative session has started. And so Robyn is going to be talking to us about that. She is the executive director of Alabama Arise. Before we talk about the legislative session, as far as what's happening, we're going to discuss Alabama Arise's legislative priorities. Medicaid expansion is, of course, a huge, part of that, and we have actually pre-recorded an interview with Debbie Smith dedicated to that we're going to be playing after we finish our interview with Robyn. And so, Robyn, welcome to the show. Appreciate you taking the time to talk to us again.
Good morning. Happy weekend, everybody.
Yeah, happy Saturday. Glad the week is over. Not looking forward to Monday already. So, Robyn, talk to us about what y'all are targeting this year. What are the issues that y'all are zeroing in on?
As y'all know, Alabama Rise is a member-led organization. That means our members pay dues. Our members select our priority legislative agendas to help poor and working class folks at the State House. So as always, we're working to expand access to affordable health care via Medicaid expansion. We've been working on that for the past 10 years, and I feel like we're closer than we've ever been before. Working to untax groceries and other essential items at the checkout aisle. We know that inflation is hammering folks right now. It's absolutely crazy that we rely on taxing chicken and green beans to fund education. We're also working on things like funding for public transit and affordable housing through this year's ARPA, American Rescue Plan relief funding. Voting rights expansion. We know that we have no power for self-directed democracy if we can't access the polls. We're working on criminal justice reforms, especially targeting things like fines and fees, crimes of poverty. We shouldn't be throwing people in jail just because they can't afford to pay a speeding ticket. We shouldn't be taking away people's driver's licenses just because of the same issue. And we're working on death penalty reform. Out of all of our issues in our criminal justice system, the most egregious is the fact that people are executed just for the crime of being poor and having poor representation. So those are what we're working on, and we got some big hills to climb at the State House this year.
Absolutely. And if y'all want some more details about Alabama Arise's legislative priorities, the first article on our website right now at tvlr.fm is a review of their policy session that they had about a week and a half ago now, where they reviewed some of these policy priorities, as well as y'all talked about some of the best ways to actually get involved in the legislative process. You talked about, even when to contact legislators, what legislators would, be the best to, contact, which ones are maybe the most movable. And so if people wanted, and so you can go to our website, tvlr.fm, to check that out. And if people wanted to get involved with y'all directly, where would they need to go to do that?
You can join us on our website, alarise.org, alarise.org. You can join us as a member for a gift of any amount. We would love to have you. You can sign up for legislative alerts, event notifications. We've got actually a legislative day coming up on Tuesday. We're going to the Capitol to talk about Medicaid expansion at 11 a.m. In 2 weeks, we have another legislative day. These are great events if you've never been involved in state policy or met with your lawmaker. You're not going to be alone there, and we'd love to have you join us.
Fantastic. So let's talk about the session then. What has the biggest thing right now is that the Kay Ivey signed this $1 billion ARPA expenditure, right?
Yes, huge news. We finally spent the $2 billion that our state was given by the federal government over 2 years ago for COVID relief funding. And we're not thrilled with everything that was done with that money. Y'all know about 2 years ago, they decided to spend $400 million of that just on building new prisons. But the bulk of the rest of that money has gone to necessary COVID relief priorities like funding for hospitals, nursing homes. We know that our healthcare system has been in crisis and will be in crisis without further support. There's funding in those bills for broadband, which, we have some concerns about how much money is going to corporations without a lot of regulation or oversight. But broadband infrastructure is a public good that we hope more electric cooperatives and counties and municipalities can be involved in administering. There's funding in there for sewer and water infrastructure, which is in dire straits in most of our communities all over the state. So there's a lot of really good priorities that were funded through that second round of ARPA money, and that was over $1 billion.
Why was it able to pass with so little debate, do you think?
I think that the leadership in the House and Senate did a lot of work between sessions to hear out member priorities from all sides. I think the finance department is responsible for administering those funds at the state level. They were really adamant that those funds have to be spent only on certain priorities, which is true. The feds have a lot of regulations about what does or does not count as COVID relief funding. So I think they were able to tell lawmakers, unfortunately, everything you want to do can't be done with this money. I think they created several really large buckets of flexible allocations so that even though the appropriations have now been made, there's still flexibility. For example, one of the pots of money is a $55 million that is just a broad range of priorities to help regular folks harmed by the economic impacts of COVID-19. And we're really excited about that money because they mentioned affordable housing, nutrition supports. We feel like there's a lot of ideas that can be funded with that money. And now our job as advocates is to go to the finance department and prove these are allowable uses of those funds. And this is how it can help people still recovering from COVID-19. So in general, I think they had some new lawmakers coming in this year. They had a lot of big ideas, but they basically said, we are never going to be able to get through the session if we spend every minute debating every priority. They kind of said, we'll let the finance department handle this. And they made it work.
And so, there are several outside of this, which they spent $1 billion in like a week and a half. That's a really kind of, it's almost, I don't know. It's pretty wild to me, even though, what would you say the overall, if you had to rate the ARPA expenditure, how would you grade it? A, B, C, D, F. What would you say?
I would give us a solid A minus. I'm saying
A minus. Wow.
Especially for this round of funding. If you have to grade them on round one of ARPA, I think that was a solid D.
That's what included the prisons, right?
Yeah. So I guess if you average the two, A minus and D, you get somewhere with a C range.
Mm-hmm.
We are not the only state that took that money and immediately put it towards prisons and jails. And I think that is just a really sad statement on our priorities as a state and as a country. I think that was a missed opportunity.
Yeah.
But when you look at the other items that were funded, in general, the fact that the legislature said, we've got to get together and put our egos aside and have some consensus, it is a shocking amount of money. And there are billions and billions of other dollars that have been appropriated without even any legislative approval or oversight. So the amount of funds that have been going into our state economy to provide relief, to boost pay for state employees, to boost pay for childcare workers, to boost pay for home care workers. All of that was done without a lot of legislative complaining or belly aching about federal funding. And that's pretty amazing.
Yeah. Where are we at on those prison expenditures? Are presumably everything is being done ahead of schedule and under budget. Is that right?
That's exactly how things work when you have a no bid contract with no transparency or oversight. Absolutely.
Right, obviously.
Doing great. The shocking news this week was that one men's mega prison, the largest mega prisons that are going to exist in our country, which is already the largest police state in the world, those prisons are going to well exceed our budget projections. To date, I have never heard of one prison costing $1 billion. I think every Alabamian should be asking questions and calling their representatives. It's pretty sad both that we know even if these prisons were constructed on time and under budget, they're not going to solve our issue, which is that we're throwing people in jail, locking them up for life, for untreated mental illnesses, untreated drug addiction, and just simply really stupid crimes. So all of that said, it's hard to even get into parsing out who screwed this up the most. But we know it's not the solution to our state's problems.
You said it was $400 million from ARPA funds in the first round that went to prisons. Where is the extra money? Now we're talking about $1 billion prison expenditure. Where is that extra money going to come from?
That's a good question. The original plan, I believe that what Ivy wanted to do, she didn't want taxpayers to read that we had spent over $1 billion on prisons. So they were very careful to only appropriate under $1 billion from state general fund money, from the ARPA money, and then the rest of it was going to come from a bond issue. We know that a lot of activism and organizing actually skewered that funding attempt to fund that bond issue. Banks don't want headlines about how they are funding mass incarceration. So, several banks had to pull out of various funding rounds. And given the state of inflation, banking right now, the global economy, I'm not sure how the state is going to finance the prisons that they have planned to build.
I guess we're going to figure it out. So, moving on into the rest of the legislative session, there are several bills that are being thrown around. Tax cuts, rebates. There's a big privatization push for in the public school area. You mentioned some criminal justice reforms that y'all are pushing. What is your read on, if you were going to give us a prediction for the rest of the legislative session and your comfort level? How are you feeling about the rest of the session?
Let me say this. I've been a registered lobbyist now for 4 legislative sessions. 2.5 of those have been really unusual years, COVID years. If I could predict what was going to happen at the State House, I would probably get paid a lot more than I get paid. Everyone, even the most seasoned political watchers, are saying this is a really unique time that we're in. The leadership in the House has basically allowed multiple ideas to surface. There is no strong, we're doing this on only this push. That means that we've heard multiple proposals to untax groceries. We know that the governor has her proposal to give a tax rebate, but legislators don't actually seem that interested in promoting that proposal. It would cost way too much money, and it's not very targeted to workers who need that help the most. I would hope that our proposal to untax groceries makes it on the ballot because, one of the things we've heard over and over again is that even Republicans and right-wingers are in a tough situation right now, right? They want to be fiscally conservative. They don't want to raise taxes. We have a huge budget surplus, and yet we know that a lot of the solid revenue that's coming into our economy is because of federal relief. We know that even if the economy, most workers are really struggling right now. So as the economy starts to level off and right size itself, we are going to have some cutbacks in education and in other programs. And they're trying to figure out how to balance the need to provide tax relief and to say that they're fiscally conservative, while also acknowledging that we have the lowest tax burden almost of any state in the country. It's just the fact that we tax poor folks more than anybody else. So there is this cognitive dissonance of, oh, wait, we've got $2 billion in the education trust fund budget, but we can't afford to cut grocery taxes because next year we might need that money. And both of those things are true. What we're proposing is getting rid of a tax loophole that benefits wealthy taxpayers. It's called the federal income tax deduction. We'd have to put that on a ballot. All of us would have to go vote and say, essentially, we think it's unfair to give this huge disproportionate tax breaks to upper income earners while we're taxing people on the basic necessities of life. So my hope is that lawmakers will come together and coalesce around one good idea to remove grocery taxes, and we'll see if that happens.
On the grocery tax stuff, there's some conversation about just not replacing the revenue, by just untaxing groceries and not replacing the revenue. And that conversation is being given air by House Minority Leader Anthony Daniels, a Democrat from Huntsville. He was on, I think it was, what was it, the Capitol TV or something, where he was talking about how, maybe we don't need to replace this funding. Maybe it'll just like magically appear. Maybe that's what's going to happen. Why is he giving air to that conversation?
I kind of wonder if it's just trolling, to be honest. That is a classic right-wing argument. It's voodoo economics. It's trickle down. It's not real. Yeah. The fact is, if I would be thrilled, right? Let's say I only have one other person in my household. So I spend $200 every 2 weeks on groceries. That's probably very low, honestly. If I save 4% every 2 weeks on $200, I'm not then going to turn around and go spend $200 on some other sales taxable item, right? That just doesn't make any sense at all. So I've had this conversation with Leader Daniels with all respect. I think everyone knows that math really doesn't work. Now, we have seen the city of Clay actually took the step to cut their grocery tax in half just to see what would happen. And they have a rollback provision. I think that if their revenue falls too much, that, they would reassess that. And they have come out and said so far it hasn't been too bad of a hit to their funding. But I can see the idea of let's try it for a month or 2 months and see how it works out. We just know historically that education costs money. Food is one of those expenses that people spend money on every month, and it reliably does bring in sales taxes. So I don't think we should be taxing food, but we shouldn't be dishonest about the fact that it will cost our state money to lose that tax revenue. Yeah,
that seemed very, very odd to me, and even potentially kind of dangerous, because like I said, it gives air to this conversation that we can just do this without any repercussions in my view. And like you said, if you save $20, $40 a month, you're not going to be able to go and spend $400 on some other sales taxable item. That's a very good point. And it's also a very good point that taxing groceries, because there's this idea in economics of elasticity, and so when my budget, if I were to take a pay cut, what are some of the first things that would go? Eating out, going to the movies, things like this. I'm going to continue to buy groceries. And so there's this groceries are a relatively stable item that you can expect stable income from. But if we get rid of that stable income and we just hope that, out of nowhere, we continue to get more sales taxes from, stereos or flat screen TVs, in an economic downturn, we'd be putting our education budget in even more of a risk, because it's dependent now on even more elastic goods that are going to be even more likely to be cut in a household budget whenever there's a household recession, let's say. And so I don't know, it was very concerning to me.
I was concerned. And now on the other side, I'm concerned about some proposals from Republicans, which they only want to untax, quote, untax healthy foods. So I don't think that it's the government's job to decide what is or is not a healthy food. And in fact, I can't believe that any conservative person, small government person would make that argument as well. And grocers will tell you they also don't want to be in the position of deciding item by item what is or is not health food, not health food. Senator Orr has proposed a bill that would only untax foods that are eligible for the WIC program. WIC is a very limited program for women, infants, and children. Basically, it's designed to support high calcium foods that are good for moms who are nursing and for infants and toddlers. So yes, baby food is on that list, whole grain breads and brown rice, canned beans and dried beans, but a lot of foods that we would consider essential staples are not on that list. So that is a proposal that's floating around out there. It's just so limited. It would be a good first step to start to untax some foods, but enforcing it practically would be really, really tough. If you've ever been on WIC or know someone on WIC, I mean, they get down to you have to buy the cheapest brand of this certain item, only this size of a can.
Right.
And ultimately, it's just let people buy the food they want to eat. People know what's best for them. And like we can find the tax revenue by actually making our income tax system more fair.
School privatization is another one that there's a lot of conversation about this right now. And I think partially because school privatization is not a popular thing among, parents and teachers and communities. There's a lot of concern about it. And so there is a really big push among pushers of privatization and vouchers to try to get this done in the first year of the quadrennium so that the electoral consequences are the least. You're in Montgomery, you're walking around these people every day. How do you feel about the prospects of one of these big school choice, quote unquote, bills going through?
I don't think we can relax. I think we have to be really concerned that these types of proposals are really moving ahead in Florida, Georgia, and Tennessee. But so far in Alabama, I have not seen one proposal that has any traction. And I think that's because so many of our lawmakers do represent rural districts. They know how important those public school institutions are to their communities. They know that diverting funds to private schools or to charter schools isn't going to help most of the kids that they represent. So we've got to be honest about the fact that it's a real threat. It is just a cash grab. But I'm really, speaking of how we grade how our legislature is doing, so far I've been happy to see that most of them are not falling for the lie. And we've got to keep up the pressure because I'm a product of public schools. So many people across our state rely on schools to be stronger, and we can't do that if we're stealing their money every chance we get.
Well, that's good to hear, because hearing the talk on right-wing radio definitely makes me concerned. But maybe some of that doesn't trickle down to actually the state capitol. And another one is another one of these conversations that y'all are wanting to push is criminal justice reform, particularly around driver's licenses. How do you feel the conversations are going around that?
It was really discouraging to see how close we came last session to passing a driver's license reform bill. I believe Senator Barfoot had this bill. He's the Judiciary Committee member, and it's very common sense, right? If we need workers in our state and we want to support public safety, taking away people's driver's licenses just because they didn't pay a ticket or had an expired tag is not help public safety or our communities as a whole. So I think that what happened last year was our Attorney General unfortunately came out and made some really incorrect and fear-mongering statements about this bill. I think we just have to keep pushing the facts. Unfortunately, it takes longer to get things done if you follow the facts, but the fact remains we have a huge worker shortage. Our jails are overflowing, our prisons are overflowing. this tough on crime, lock everyone up mentality has not served us well. And I think a lot of this posturing it's based in classism and racism. It's not based in the reality of what will make our state a safer place to live. So it's going to be tough. I mean, we've got a whole bunch of new lawmakers coming in now who really want to seem tough and want to trade on the politics of fear. And we have to say fear is not a good metric to make public policies around. We've shown that, we can make our community better by investing more in education and mental health care, substance use disorder treatments, versus, hey, if you screw up, we're sorry, you have forfeited your life and you must pay through, the decades for mistakes that you've made.
Absolutely. There was a big anti-protest bill that went forward last session that did not pass. And I haven't seen any talk about it being resurrected this session. Do you think that kind of issue is lost its resonance among the folks that would be interested in passing such a bill?
I wouldn't be surprised to see it again. Unfortunately, it's a take your pick. Is it going to be attacking trans kids or gender nonconforming people? Is it going to be fear mongering about protesters? What is going to be the red meat issue of the year? Trying to ban abortion even more. These are not. I do find it interesting to look at some of the discourse around protest and how it shifted after January 6th. After it shifted with the trucker protests that were going on. Protest is a great American tradition. The roots of our country go back to protest. So the more we can point that out, I think it gives the lie to the fact that this bill is anti-American and it's unconstitutional.
Anything else? Any other big issues that we should be tracking?
I think we got to keep an eye on Medicaid expansion. I know you're speaking to Debbie about that too. We do have a big rally coming up Tuesday at the State House. There is a lot of excitement about the fact that North Carolina, with a Republican majority legislature, is this close to expanding Medicaid. And I think Alabama lawmakers are paying attention to that. For the past 10 years, it has felt like politically just an insane decision to leave all this federal money on the table that could be going to support rural hospitals and healthcare for working Alabamians. I think that, the time to be afraid of the issue is over, and I'm hoping that lawmakers are going to act on that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like you said, we're going to be talking to Debbie about that more in depth. Folks, if you want to get involved with Alabama Arise, you can go to their website, alarise.org, alarise.org. They've got an upcoming lobby day in Montgomery on Tuesday. So, Robyn, appreciate your time, and we'll definitely be keeping in touch.
Thank you, Jacob. Take care.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project. And you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.